Hello, I'm Jay Gilmer. I've lived in Pittsburgh for 40 plus years now. My Pittsburgh story begins when I started, I was at New York University Law School and needed a job. Interviewed at law firms around the country and came here. I got one job offer and it was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And so I came here. That was the first time I'd ever been here was when I came to the job interview. That was in 1980. The interviews were 1982. I began working here in 1983. A relative I had that lived near New York who had gotten close to had a sister who lived in Pittsburgh, which is really the only reason I interviewed here. That relative was Elaine Effort, who was on KQV News for 40 years until it closed down. So I interviewed in Pittsburgh, got the job here. I was one of the few Black attorneys at the Buchanan Ingersoll law firm. One thing that impressed me about that firm initially was that Ron Davenport was there. Ron Davenport was the principal owner of Sheridan Broadcasting, which owned the Whammo radio station. This was one of the preeminent African-American oriented radio stations in Pittsburgh. And Sheridan Broadcasting was a national chain of radio stations. So he was there, and I thought he'd be a great mentor to have, and that I would follow in his footsteps in the legal world here in Pittsburgh. When I got here, I looked for a church. I needed to find a church, and I ended up finding Holy Cross Church in Homewood. I'd never been to Homewood either, so that was the only Episcopal church in Pittsburgh that was preeminently Black. And so I went there and just met the people that were there and got to know them. Little did I know that many of the people I was meeting were fairly distinguished, both Pittsburgh and nationally. So those are people that I was influenced by in those early years. And as a Black attorney at the Buchanan Ingersoll law firm, I started to get to know community members, obviously. And even though I thought I was going in the corporate law direction, and I did get experience seeing what corporate law was all about, the people that I was interacting with were community people who were doing work in the communities. But I was there at the firm. I started doing business law, which means business financing. It means how to get things done. That's what corporate lawyers actually do. And so I was learning how private companies, very few of whom are owned by African Americans, were getting things done. And so that's how I learned. And because I was one of the few African American attorneys in a law firm in Pittsburgh, especially one of the few younger ones, people started taking notice of me just because I was there, not because of anything I had done, just because I was there. And one of the people who took notice of me was Bernard Jones. So he saw me as a young attorney, a young Black attorney, invited me to join the board of Urban Youth Action, which he had founded with Daisy Wilson and some other people that was doing youth work in the communities. And he put me on the board just because I was here. He was mentoring me, even though I didn't know what that concept was, but he was doing that. He picked me up and helped me to get that start. That was the first time I'd ever been on a board of directors. I had no idea what boards could do or would do. So I was there learning from the master, really. And that really got me started in doing much more community work, which is what I've been doing really ever since then. Although I thought I was going to be doing corporate law work, it was clear that the people I was encountering at church and in the community were not doing mergers and acquisitions and million-dollar financing. They were trying to make communities better, improve communities, build buildings, help children, things like that. And so that's what I started to do as well. And one of my first experiences when I was at Urban Youth Action was when I walked into the office and saw their articles of incorporation on the wall. I wondered, why was it on the wall? Because at the corporate law firm, we were doing that kind of thing all day, every day. That was not a big deal at all. But in the Black community, it was a big deal. There were not a lot of Black attorneys, especially corporate attorneys, just running around all over the place like there were in the white communities. And so to have that, I started to realize the importance of corporate law and corporate lawyers in making things happen and being able to negotiate with those who had assets and resources that could be utilized for good in the communities. And then most recently, after my semi-retirement, retirement from the city, I ended up going back out to Homewood, where I am now the executive director of Operation Better Block out in Homewood, which is here to strengthen community ties and build up the community and to help with community development and resource development among Homewood residents. When I came out to Homewood, I obviously having no background, I didn't really know what had happened before. All I knew was what was going on when I was there. And when I first got involved, starting to represent the people that I was introduced to, it was in the era when there was a movement of revitalization, and things like when the Kentucky Fried Chicken was opened at the corner of Homewood and Frankstown. And one of my clients ended up building the Dairy Queen right across the street from there. Another one of my clients put up the Athlete's Foot shoe store just a block away from there. And unfortunately, at that same time, it was just a few years thereafter, they built the Rite Aid's drugstore. And after the Rite Aid manager got killed walking across the street to go to the bank, then that closed down, and really everything started turning in the wrong direction. So Homewood has come a long way. The population has decreased significantly, but the level of involvement now is probably greater than ever, with potential projects, with focus, with resources. And now in my role at Operation Better Block, I now have an opportunity to continue the work that we started way back in the 90s, and hopefully see the result of that, which hopefully will be more housing for people of diverse incomes and more opportunities for people that can live and work in that neighborhood. So I think the future is bright out in Homewood right now, as long as we're wise. And I'd encourage more African American attorneys to get involved, because those skills that are usually behind the scenes are critically important to getting things done. We need people on the front lines who are out there on the street and in the street, and we also need people in the back to try to make sure that things go well and that things get organized properly.